Hey guys, Jason. This episode is a little different than usual. Matt was such a unique guest. Really enjoyed my time with him, but of course, I'm not in the actual studio this week, so the audio's kind of choppy, and my lighting on me was terrible. But it was a great episode, and here you go. Hey, welcome to Leadership Loading Podcast. I'm Jason McClaren. Welcome to my guest, Matthew Jones. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Jason. It's great to be here.
Matt, tell us first, let's start with what led you to join the military?
Once upon a time, I was working as a dishwasher as an 18-year-old man in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, and that job was painful and humiliating on various levels. Mostly the poverty, but I also felt that cramming my beautiful hair into a hairnet just wasn't doing it for me. So I needed to go somewhere where they would, chop it off and I could start my destiny. By that I mean I wanted a place where I could have ambition and have room to progress. Because once you progress beyond dishwasher, you get to be the fry guy. And no offense to fry guys. I joined up as a guy who drives warships. I drove ships for about 6 years. I started working in Army headquarters. Somehow the skills translated because it was all the same kind of like crisis response type thing. I might swear all of this time in the military has marked me in my vulgarity. Then I deployed to Afghanistan. I spent a year in Afghanistan working in an operations center in Kandahar in Panjwai district. After that, I went back to school. I did a master's. I started working in literary communities. I started editing literary magazines. I was the artistic director of a poetry festival. I retired from the military. I went abroad. I lived in Nicaragua for 6 months. I taught in China for a year, and now I've been in Paris for the last 8 years. 4 glorious days ago, my first book finally came out. It's called Predators, Reapers, and Deadlier Creatures. It says everything I need to say about drone warfare, true love, monsters, dehumanization, and various other things.
All right. Well, you answered my second question, what you did in the military. And so now what you're doing. So that's where you learned to write was in the military?
They figured out in the military pretty quickly that I could write. So they had me whenever I was working in a headquarters or something like that, or even on the ships, I'd always be like, okay, get Matt to write that thing. Get Matt to write the letter of condolence or the memo or the progress evaluation report or the summary investigation or the board of inquiry thing. But I would say, looking back now that I've been in Paris studying at the feet of better writers, that wasn't actually writing. That was just kind of one type of specialized technical writing. I work at this, or I volunteer at this organization called the Wrath-Bearing Tree, which is a magazine that often publishes veterans, particularly from the US. And there are a lot of guys like me who got out of the military and then are wondering, like, how do I tell a story? Because the skills don't actually translate. So I spend a fair amount of time editing those guys and trying to give them tools because the skills are new and the storytelling devices. Like in the military, they taught us how to suck the emotion out of language so that you could transmit the language easily. And even something like really difficult, like lining up a drone strike on a human being. You wouldn't say lining up a drone strike on a human being, you'd say a target. And then you could shrink it down even further into an acronym. So by the end, you're looking at a kind of semi-language. I used to call it anti-poetry, which wouldn't resemble what was going on at all, and it would be totally devoid of language. One of the things I was trying to do in my book was like unsanitize language to make language dirty again.
And that's interesting because I think a lot of military people want to write it when they get out. Like I've interviewed several people on this podcast that are authors. So what would be the first tip for someone that's like, I just want to get this stuff out of my head and get it into a book? What would be their first thing they need to do?
I feel like it's always a good idea to go to some therapy and trying to find kind of the therapy that works for you, I think is a big deal. I think particularly for military dudes, some kind of, I don't know, man circle where you can be with other guys who've been through and seen horrific things or whatever, and then you can feel safe and non-monstrous when you talk to each other. But traditional therapy or trauma training or any of that stuff, I think is all really legitimate. When you write a book, not thinking about an audience and it's just a kind of vomit onto the page because you're in pain, I think that is a type of therapy as well. The challenge is making that type of therapy publishable. There's something really self-indulgent about writing down your therapy sessions. But if you've lived a spicy enough story, I think you can get away with it. I think that's another reason I had to get out of the dish pit and stop scraping nacho cheese out of gross platters was because I just wanted to live more of a story than that.
100%.
I think you got to do a bunch of drafts, Jason. I think you can't just be like, "Hey, here's my first draft. I'm a writer now." I think you got to study. You got to find the nerds you can learn from. You got to treat your writing as seriously as you treated your trade in the military. You've switched trades basically. There's always a training process.
Yeah, you gotta one, you gotta do your research. So you probably gotta read some books, and like you said, find your audience and who is gonna want to read your book. And then you talk about being spicy. Like I know I was an Air Force firefighter, so I've got a few spicy things in there that I could sprinkle in. But some of us military people, like you said, we're cooks, or we're. I think the most odd position we had in the Air Force was like the physical fitness people that just worked at the gym all day. I'm like, how'd you get that job?
Yeah, that sounds actually pretty good.
So I
I think
think,
yeah.
yeah, just using your skills. I know some of them deployed, so they have probably some stories there. But I think also, like you said, going to therapy or some kind of way of getting that out of your head, the things that are not just military related. I'm working on my book right now, and it's more about my childhood and how I was raised without a father, and kind of raising myself and my brothers. But yeah, I did the same thing, like you said. I kind of just brain dumped my therapy session, and now I'm going through cleaning it up and then putting in the spicy bits, the crazy stuff that happened growing up.
Of being a parent to your own brothers, sisters, is packed with themes that matter. I think when you're writing, especially if you're in a first person story or like a biography or an autobiography, it's like, do the themes matter? And I think that yours do. And this is why I wanted to write about drone warfare and dehumanization, because it just kept me going. It made it feel like I was writing for more than just myself. And that story that you're describing sounds a really important one for a lot of men, particularly. And if you haven't noticed, this might be a really weird time for men. So I think we do need help and more voices. Well, what do you do? Like, do you go to like writing workshops and stuff? Are you studying at the feet of the nerds?
No, I'm in a doctoral program, so it kind of prompted me to start this. But my doctoral program is in business, so nothing related to what I'm writing about. But I've had to write a lot, so that's what kind of got me going. And I'm one of them people that my wife tells other people, "Oh, when Jason tells you a story, if you knew he didn't lie, you think he was lying." So I thought, well, maybe my stories are that good. So that's kind of
Nice,
what led to it.
encouraging.
What
I
led you
think,
to start traveling? I know you said after you got out of the military, you've been traveling now, and now you're in Paris. So how did all that work out?
well, again, it was just not wanting to stay in some tiny box. And the position I was in the military by the time I was really seriously thinking about getting out of the military was I was just starting to warm a chair with, and I hadn't seen that much of the world other than the strange Arctic wastelands where they'd sent me, like Canadian Arctic, Alaska, Greenland, or Afghanistan, or a couple kind of tequila sodden trips down into Mexico. And it was like, there's more to see and there's more to experience. I'm particularly intrigued by Europe because it's such a, a mixture of cultures and languages and histories overlapping. So getting away kind of the more monolithic North American megacultures into rich exchange I found was really illuminating for me. I'm still working on my French. It's still somehow crap after being here for 8 years, but I get by.
So your book, it just came out 4 days ago, and you said it was already a top seller the first day.
Astonishingly, I very briefly beat out Canadian superstar Margaret Atwood. But I guess I now get to call the book a bestseller for the rest of my life, which I'm going to do, Jason, because I'm because I'm shameless like that. I like to laugh and I like to joke and I'm pretty affable, and that's sort of what I've become and how I operate. Although in the book, it's funny. I'm not going to say it isn't funny, but it also goes to the dark places where the war goes. So I got some teasers for you. Would you like a teaser?
Yeah.
The book is punctuated by these boxes that interrupt the narrative a little bit and allow me to expand on different issues. So I'll just dig into a few of these, and if you want me to shut up, just tell me to shut up, or otherwise just edit it out. Just edit me, okay? Censorship is real. But one thing I wanted to talk about was the ramp ceremony and explain what that was. We dreamed of going home, but not in a box. Doesn't matter to the dead anyway how much we polished our buttons and blackened our boots. Doesn't matter how straight the lines of soldiers, perfectly dressed at arm's length from each other, how long they stood at attention while the padre mumbled a few words into the microphone, how the bagpipe pierced the ear or swamped it with its drone. Whether it was a good man or bad one who died, whether it was a heart attack folding blankets or a bullet in the teeth, or a shabby grenade that burst too soon, or an IED that shoot off his legs. Didn't matter if it was a warrior's death or a suicide or an accident, someone would stitch us back together, rest our bodies in the coffin, and drape a flag over top for a bit of dignity before packing us into a plane for the long flight home. From there, the hearse drove us from Trenton to Toronto along the highways of heroes as solemn Canadians watched from over. Talking about my book, which is all about my service in Afghanistan and my comrade service in Afghanistan, because sort of like recently been denied by some of your politicians that there were other countries there, but there were 156 Canadian soldiers killed in Afghanistan. There was nearly 100 French soldiers killed in Afghanistan, as my students today at the École Militaire reminded me. So, okay, I'm going to jump. May I jump?
Yep, go for it.
Crispy. And who'd have thought I'd end up roommates with the guy on the other side of purgatory? Him bird frail with his stump, learning to walk again. His cough in the night for my strong arm and a lift to the jaw. Me on my knees, lacing up his one good boot before his arms got better. If I'd done a better job, got a faster chopper from another HQ, he'd still be whole. He says, I ain't wrecked. Crispy's jealous because I still have both feet on the ground. Thinks I owe him something since he cut me down from the rafters. Army crawled up my pant leg with a knife in his teeth. My neck was too thick to break anyway during the slow spin as my specters clapped and hooted, same way we used to cheer for a drone strike. One-legged won't even give me my grief. Now I owe him double, too in debt to die. Crispy insists. Just tell the truth.
That one was a little more humorous, that section.
But dark, you know. It's constantly rolling around with hurt so good. But that's the way we got in the war as well, you know. Kind of have to laugh in order to move through it. I'm assuming since you're in the military and you've got the haircut that you lost some friends to suicide, because this seems to be how it goes. This is how we go out. That's
Yeah,
why
just recently as 3 years ago was my most recent one that I know of. So, Matt, if you had one leadership tip of advice for a new leader, what would it be?
sorry, my leadership tip would be about ethics. That's one of the things that I'm trying to promote in the book. There's all this kind of dehumanizing rhetoric, for example, calling the targets, calling the targets the names of famous betrayers, calling the targets, sexualizing the names of the targets so that they can become someone you want to give it to. Like it was all this kind of twisted, perverted way of talking about the enemy. And then enter the leader who says, from now on, we give all of the targets human names. I was teaching at the École Militaire, the School of War in Paris last year, and one of the soldiers gave this great seminar, and it was about cult leaders. He talked about all these famous cult leaders in Europe as well as North America, and all of the skills for a cult leader and a military leader or a business leader are all the same. You know, you got to have your influence, you got to have your courage, you're resilient, you take chances, you can give a good speech, you can persuade people, blah, 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 blah. The only true difference between a cult leader and a military leader is an ethical code of some sort. So there's a lot of people who want to learn about leadership so that they can build a better shrine to themselves, so that they can dominate more people. And I think those are very bogus reasons to learn about leadership. I think we should learn about leadership to help other people.
Definitely. Well, Matt, I don't guess you have a website for your book, do you?
I do indeed.
Okay.
MattJamesJones.com, or you can pick it up on Gasp, Amazon, Predators, Reapers, and Deadlier Creatures.
And can people reach out to you on your website directly?
People can totally reach out. They can join the mailing list. They can find me on the Instagram. They can find me on the Facebook. I'd be very curious to get whatever. Happy. Welcome aboard, guys. Please don't invade us, but yes, buy the book. Would love to have some more buddies down there. I mean, I've been working at the American magazine for years, and I did serve and fight in your war, and it's a part of me now. So the more I can build these bonds, the better.
Well, Matt, I wish we had more time, but thanks for coming on, and I may have you on again another day.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Hey, everybody. This episode of the Leadership Loading Podcast was brought to you by Go Heroes Inc., goheroes.org. If you'd like to be a sponsor, go ahead and check out our website or email us, and we'll get you all the information you need.
There are thousands of leadership and management podcasts to choose from. We're glad you chose the Leadership Loading Podcast, a Go Heroes production. If you'd like to support Go Heroes Inc., visit www.goheroes.org. And with that, it's time to wrap up today's show. Thank you so much for listening. We sincerely hope you liked it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your family and friends. Let's all grow together. Thanks for listening to the Leadership Loading Podcast. Leadership in